Hey guys, welcome to our lesson on collecting data. This is our first lesson in our statistics unit, and so we're going to get to know a little bit about statistics and get into how we can make samples to make predictions about a population. So first of all, let's talk about what's the difference between a census and sampling. I'm sure you guys have heard of the US Census. That's when everybody in the United States is accounted for and whatnot. So a census is when all the individuals of a population are surveyed or studied, and the information we get from a census is called a parameter. It's a number that summarizes the characteristics of the population we're talking about. So basically, if we were trying to find the average age of the US citizens, we would ask every single citizen in the United States and get that average, and that number would be our parameter that we're going to describe the population with. Now, taking a census is very difficult, as you can imagine. If we wanted to ask everybody in the United States, that's pretty much impossible. So a lot of times we take just samples of the population to do that. So that's when we only ask some of the individuals in a population, and then we use that value to make a prediction about the entire population. So this is where statistics comes from. Statistics is when we are using a sample to make a prediction about a population. So right here, so that number we get from our sample is called a statistic, and we're going to use that number to kind of summarize what we feel would be true of the population. So in order to start with statistics, we have to find the sample we're going to use. So we're going to talk about different sampling methods that may be used. But of course, when we are sampling, the goal is to obtain a representative sample. So it would be silly to ask only people in high school their age and take a average of that and, project that upon the whole population of the United States, because we just asked high schoolers who are between the ages of 13 to 18. So we have to make a sample that's going to make sense for the situation. Okay, so because of that, sometimes our method of sampling would be called biased. So the one I just talked about would have been a biased sample because it would not be representative of the population. So it says may not be representative of the population. And it can produce statistics that lead to inaccurate conclusions. So if we would take the average of all these high schoolers, it'd probably be about, let's say, 16. That's definitely not the average age of the entire United States population. So let's talk about different sampling methods. The first sampling method is really the best because it's random. That's what it's called, random sample. And each individual in the population has an equal chance of being selected. So I have a column here that we're going to put some key descriptors. So we're going to put equal chance. It's basically like you could put numbers in a hat and randomly select them out. That would be a random sample. Okay, a self-selected sample is when individuals volunteer to be part of the sample. So basically what happens here is the individuals choose to participate. Okay. We also have a convenience sample. Individuals are selected based on how accessible they are. This means convenience for the person who's doing the study. So let's just say this is easy for the researcher. So my example of just asking high school students their age would be very convenient for me if I was doing the research because I'm around high school kids all day long. A systematic sample is when members of the sample are chosen according to a rule, such as every nth individual in a population. So the key descriptor I'd put here is using a rule. So it's very strict how you are picking people, and so that word rule is important, and it's a system, so it's called systematic. Okay, stratified and cluster are two types that both involve groups. A stratified sample is when the population is divided into groups and individuals from each group are selected, usually randomly. So I'm going to say divided into groups. Members from each group randomly selected. Okay. Now, a cluster sample is when we divide into groups again, but you choose a whole group, or you might just choose certain members from one group or from just two groups. So the big difference here is that in a stratified sample, you're going to divide the population into groups, but you are going to choose members from every group that you divided. In a cluster sample, you are going to divide into groups. So I'm going to put this. But you are only going to select from one group or two groups, not from all groups. So let's say members selected from one, two groups, not all. So for instance, let me give you an example. If I had, let's come back to high school, I'm going to divide all the students into their grades. So 9, 10, 11, 12. If I was going to do a stratified sample, I would randomly choose 25 ninth graders, 25 10th graders, 25 12th graders, and 25 11th graders. So 25 from each class. However, if I was going to do a cluster sample, I would only choose from, let's say, the ninth graders. That would be a cluster, or maybe just the 9th and 12th graders, okay? I'm not selecting from all groups. Okay, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an introduction to these sampling methods so that you're ready to try the examples in class. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.